After last lesson, we have even more notes than we had before painting, and the model looks cool, and I'm sure you want to send it to someone or maybe use Sketchfab to upload it. But unfortunately, the setup we have here is not possible to use anywhere else than just in Blender. You can send the whole file to someone and it will work, but if you need your model with textures to work in Unity or Unreal or any other software, it won't export properly. That's why most of the programs where you can create different textures have also an ability to bake the textures. What does it mean? We're putting our computer to the oven and baking the textures until they're nice and crispy? Well, not exactly. Texture baking process we'll do in a minute allows us to collapse all the textures we painted into one. So everything what was plugged into the base color will be one map instead of this little mess we have here. Our roughness texture, I mean the color ramp, will also be baked to one texture as well as the normal map. There is also a second method of baking the textures when you have a high poly model and you want to bake the details to the low poly model. Most usually used for transferring normal information to the low poly mesh so it can look like a denser mesh without adding geometry. In our case, we'll just bake these textures we painted, so let's see how it works, because it's super easy. Let's start with the base color as it looked the most scary because we have a lot of textures here. In the render properties, let's find the bake tab. We can see some options, for example the selected to active, which allows us to bake the high poly model to the low poly one, as I mentioned a moment ago, but we need to take a look at the bake type option. If you want to bake all the textures into one and bake the lights too, you can select the combined option. Let's see what else we have in the drop-down. We can bake a lot of textures. Most of them are in the principled shader, but some of them allows us to bake the shadows or even the UVs. We can also see the margin size at the bottom and we need to change it to something else. 4 pixels will be enough because we have plenty of space between our islands after unwrapping. And just adjust this value depending on the distance between your islands. Okay, let's go back to baking the base color. Let's select the diffuse from the drop-down. Technically, diffuse is a different name for base color map here, but diffuse maps can also have some light information baked into it, and base color is just a pure color, without any lights or shadows. After selecting this option from the drop-down, you can see the Influence tab, and Contribution means if you want to bake direct light or indirect light or color, or maybe everything together. For now, we'll deselect direct and indirect options because we want to bake the color only. We need to remember that we need to have a texture to bake to. So in the shader editor, we'll create one and name it Baked Binoculars Base Color. Before we'll do anything, we need to unplug the metallic and transmissive textures from the principled BSDF because they can mess up the colors and make them darker. Now it is important to have this texture active, what means it must be clicked as the last one before leaving the shader editor. It's important because we can accidentally bake something on a different texture, and if we didn't save it before, we might have a problem. We need to select the whole model too, otherwise just some part of the textures will be baked. So both the model and the texture are selected, so now we can press bake. Something is happening at the bottom of the screen, and after the progress bar reached 100% for every part of the model, and we got information that the map was baked, let's find this texture in the image editor. I will just add one on the left. All the textures in one texture, looking great. Now let's create another texture and name it Baked Binoculars Roughness. You probably guessed that we need to select the texture and then from the dropdown, select roughness. Nothing to change in the options, so we can click Bake. And the elements are appearing in the image window and we have our color ramp roughness magic baked into the single texture. Now let's try with normal. Creating a texture, naming it Baked Binoculars Normal, and selecting Normal from the dropdown. We won't change anything here, but you can see that you can also bake the DirectX normal because you can invert the green channel by changing it to -Y. Let's stay with the defaults now and click Bake again. And we see a bluish texture with some details. You can change the strength of the bump map for the leather and the rest and see how the normal map would look like. And the last map we'll bake is ambient occlusion. So let's create another texture, name it Baked Binoculars AO, and look for the ambient occlusion in the Bake type dropdown. Let's press Bake and we can see that the image is super noisy even with 2000 samples we have here. While baking, all the textures use the render samples to render the images, so they shouldn't be set to too low, but the solution for ambient occlusion is to temporarily turn off the noise threshold option and we can bake the texture again. Now it will take way more time, but as the image is appearing, we don't see any noise. After baking all of the textures, let's save them real quick. After saving them, we are able to change the color space for the normal, roughness, and ambient occlusion maps to non-color. Now to see the results of our baking, we can plug them into the corresponding inputs instead of the nodes we had before, and mix ambient occlusion with the base color. And we have a nice PBR setup of textures now, and we are ready to send it to someone. As you can see, the process of baking wasn't difficult, we just need to remember about a few things and we're good to go.